اليوم سأطلق العنان لقوتكم الخارقة. تعالوا وانضموا إلي. Assalamu alaikum, marhaban. I'm Ryan from Arabic Workshop, and I'd like to tell you today that I've been trying to learn Arabic for a very, very long time. One of the many reasons for my lack of progress over the years was that I'd failed to understand the purpose of the different language skills in acquiring language, and as a result, perhaps made the wrong choices initially. That's changed in recent years, and I've noticed huge gains in my vocabulary, and I've actually enjoyed Arabic. By no means is my experience unique. A lot of people I speak to have said exactly the same thing. And more importantly, I've realized that the specialists in language acquisition say exactly the same. So hopefully today, I'd like to get you to rethink the 4 skills. That's your listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And to really think about listening in particular as a superpower and maybe bring some joy back into your Arabic. So when you start learning Arabic, you're quite often told that you need to concentrate on all 4 skills to give your language a full rounding. And you might have also been told that improvements in one particular skill actually has an effect on everything else, which is true to some extent. In my case, I started up focusing on reading and writing for 2 reasons. The first is I was trying to comprehend and understand the Quran when I read it, and I had an ambition for reading other books. And the second was that there were very few opportunities for listening and speaking in the UK for someone learning Arabic as a foreign language. So persisting over the years, I got very frustrated with my lack of progress, and I decided that I really had to see how people were making progress in other languages and what was really going on with language acquisition. So I think the point at which things changed for me was reading up about the way we as human beings acquire language. So it turns out that the academics think about the 4 skills as 2 categories: input and output. Input being listening and reading, output being writing and speaking. For acquisition, your brain, or should I say the language acquisition device part of your brain, requires a lot of input. And by lot, I mean a lot of input. Something that I was not getting at all with my hour class once a week. And while it's also true that while some academics consider the output skills also important for acquisition, the input skills outweigh the output skills by a huge degree. In fact, many consider the input skills as what's needed for acquisition and the output skills as a test of acquisition. So I felt a compelling need to change what I was doing when I read the arguments put forward by Professor Stephen Krashen. He argued that the evidence and studies showed that more output did not result in more language development, that language acquisition can occur without any output at all, that increasing input increases the quality of output, and that forcing output is a cause of considerable anxiety. Okay, so we've made the argument that input skills are more important than output skills for language acquisition. Why are you convinced about listening being more important than reading, Ryan? What's with that? So I think I can attribute that a lot to personal experience. I've spent a lot of time over the last few years paying for conversation classes, carefully selecting videos and shows on YouTube to try and improve the amount of input that I'm getting. And I found that I get the best bang for my buck when I listen compared to when I'm reading. The sheer volume of input that you can achieve by just listening as opposed to reading, to me, just doesn't compare. I think as well, a lot has been written about the importance of listening over the other skills. You can achieve language proficiency through reading and writing and speaking, but language expertise is only achieved through listening. And part of the reason for that is that is language. Language is not just the words you speak, but what you mean by it, the intonations, the stresses, the hidden messages, the non-verbal cues, all of that only comes through listening. And these are things that we absorb subconsciously without thinking about them. To give you an example, if you're learning English, the phrase "get out of my face" or "I'm on fire," the distinction between home and house. My point is, a lot of the subtleties of language can only be picked up through listening, and that we do it all the time and in a very, very natural way. But what about the output skills? When will I be able to speak? When will I be able to write? Isn't that important in language development? Of course it is, but everything in good time. If you are acquiring language naturally, you will start to produce it. It just takes a little bit of time. In some cases, it may take a few months. In some cases, it might take a few weeks. The point is, if you force production, if you force output, there is good evidence that you hinder language acquisition. You've got to just be confident and trust the process. Give it time. It's going to take time. You will get there. You will be able to speak. You will be able to write. Before we conclude, I want to talk about anxiety in listening, because this is something that's been documented a lot in the literature. There is a lot of anxiety in listening for many, many reasons, but one of the main reasons is what's known as a bottom-up approach. Most learners feel like they need to know each and every word in order to acquire a language, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's really important while you're trying to listen your way to acquisition, to try and listen for the message, the gist, to try and understand the content of what you're listening to. And, oh, by the way, I've just learned a little bit of Arabic, but you know what? I understood the story. I understood what was going on. It's also important to understand that you're going to need to tolerate a certain amount of noise. What do I mean by that? If someone were telling you a story or telling you a joke and used the odd word here or there that you didn't understand, but you were able to continue with the story, you would not interrupt that person because you are looking for the payoff. You're looking for the punchline and the laugh. Now, that's not to say that you're going to be in situations where bottom-up processing is important. For example, don't go into the Arab world and ask for directions and just try and understand the gist. There, it's really important that you understand all the details. And it's really important that you as a learner are strategic about the type of listening that you're doing. So some concluding pieces of advice. Make a daily habit of input, ideally listening. Aim for the gist of the story and tolerate the noise. Aim for about 95% that you can understand. Don't try to become more efficient. Language learning is an iterative process. It has to be built up in layers. If you consciously try to improve the efficiency of that process, you're likely to be building up anxiety and reducing the amount of acquisition that's taking place. It's going to take time for your ear to get tuned. It's going to take time for you to start understanding context, subtleties. Just spend the time. You will thank yourself for it later. I want you to think of listening as your superpower, but this is a superpower that's not a gift. It's a superpower that you are going to work on and build. But once you have that, you are going to become a language acquisition machine. And who knows, you might even transfer that into other languages and become a polyglot eventually. I hope that is useful. I hope it resonates with your experience. And I hope that this leads on to bigger things for you in your Arabic. Join me in the next few videos where we take on some simple concepts to understand what we're trying to achieve through the 100 Days of Arabic Challenge. أتطلع إلى لقائكم قريبا وداعا والسلام عليكم.